Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
I got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there, and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport.
Amateur Traveler, episode 228. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about Shibams, Khat, and Kalashnikovs as we go to Yemen.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not, maybe not.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. And the big story this week is obviously the volcano in Iceland and how that has impacted the air traffic in Europe. At least half of the planes in Europe are grounded, and the reason for that, if you haven't looked into it, is that when the dust from a volcano gets into an aircraft engine, it has a tendency to stop working. And so that's something they're trying to avoid. There was an interview, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes at amateurtraveler.com, about an airline pilot who a few years back was flying near Indonesia and flew into the ash from a volcano, and all four of the engines on the aircraft shut down. Now, he kept his cool and apparently made this announcement on the loudspeaker. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a small problem. All four engines have stopped. We are doing our damnedest to get them under control. I trust you are not in too much distress. You gotta love coolness under pressure. And they actually hold the record for the longest glide for an aircraft not designed for that. They glided for 15 minutes, lost about 2/3 of their altitude, glided out of the ash cloud, started 3 of the engines, and made an emergency landing in Jakarta. So that's one of the reasons why the airplanes are not flying in Europe this week. Before we get into the interview, I also have an announcement for you. I had announced previously that I could offer you a 5% discount on Globus tours. We've changed that because I found some people who were offering 10%, and I went back to Globus and we changed it so that you can actually now get that same discount through the Amateur Traveler. And because the Egypt photo tour in November is being done by Globus, that also applies to that trip. And so the cost of that trip has gone down. That's the good news. The bad news is that tour is filling up. And if you do want to go, it would be a good idea to book as soon as possible. but I'm getting excited about it. I talked to at least 6 people over the last few weeks who are ready to go, people that I know, and that's going to be a fun tour. So I hope you can join us. I'd like to welcome to the show Chris Rosenkrans from Pennsylvania, who's coming to us to talk to us about Yemen. Chris, welcome to the show.
Chris, how are you?
Good. Now, Yemen is not on most people's travel radar. In fact, I'm willing to bet that the majority of people couldn't picture where Yemen is on a map. So why did you go? Where is it?
Well, Yemen is on the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula. It's across the Red Sea from Djibouti and Ethiopia and Somalia. I guess just its neighborhood would be enough to deter a lot of people. And I guess the people's stereotypical images of the Gulf and Saudi Arabia can be another way to deter people. I was told many things. That it was boring, it was uninteresting, it was dangerous, but none of the above proved to be true, and it proved to be one of my favorite places I've ever visited. And by far best value in the region, like nothing like the prices of its neighbors. So.
And when you say one of the best places you've been to, my impression from the conversations we've had in email so far is you've been to a few places, so that's not just like you've been to Philadelphia and to Yemen.
No, I spent about the past 7 years of my life traveling for, say, intercultural communications. There's been a few bumps here and there, but for the most part, everywhere's been really friendly. It's a lot safer and easier than it's made out to be. So I visited Yemen in 2008, around the winter in the northeastern United States, so it was blazing hot at the time. An ideal time to go. I started in the capital, in Sana'a.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the country is of the size where you could probably see most of what there is in between 2 and 4 weeks. I spent about a week and a half there at first, then went to Ethiopia for a while, and then came back and spent longer. I'd say that the capital in itself, even if you just had to stop over for some reason or business, is absolutely one of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen. The price of lodging, of food, of transport. A lot of people picture the stereotypical Arabia, all of the ancient palaces, but from what I understand, I think the Gulf states like Kuwait and Dubai, there's not much of that left anymore, or
right.
Not of what people hype it up to be. But Yemen, it's really absolutely all there. It feels like you're lost in a giant maze of gingerbread castles, like kind of like skyscrapers with frosting and like stained glass windows. And I was told it was the fastest growing city in the world at the moment. A lot of people are pouring in. Still a very tribal and nomadic culture out there. But people are wonderful, polite, very inquisitive. And, yeah, I think, like, the scenery is just stunning. It is really something out of a fantasy. And it took me by surprise. I still really cherish the time there. And I'll go back even now.
Now, in terms of an itinerary that you would recommend for Yemen, when I look at the map of Yemen, it looks like the roads only cover half the country anyway. Half the country is still more desert. What would you recommend someone do to see Yemen?
Well, I think you would need at least 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should circle out from the capital and go to the Haraz Mountains, and you can see some very nice places around there. There's 2 Shibams in the country, and they're both pretty famous. One Shibam, it's pretty easy to remember, like Shibam, is closer to the capital.
And I'm going to get you to define Shibam.
All right. Shibam is kind of a city carved into a slope over the Haraz Mountains, and so I think tribes live there because it would give a good vantage point so they could see who's coming from anywhere around. But also, a lot of people picture this region as being very arid, which it is in part of the empty quarters in the east. In the capital and in some of the outlying villages, there's communal gardens. So, for instance, wander around the capital city, each quarter of the city has its own garden where anyone can grow and take food as they please. And some of the outlying villages, I think the population's a little too much for it to be sustainable now, but food and starvation traditionally wasn't much of a problem. And now there's a new crop called khat, which is kind of like a native stimulant there that they all chew and they sell in the souks. And so they also grow that in parts around the capital. But as for itinerary, I think because gas is so subsidized that you can even get tickets for gasoline depending on your drivers, or you can get minibuses and such. And to go to the way north, you need to join a military convoy.
When you say get tickets for gas, to hire a driver, you would get tickets for gas? I'm not following you there.
Oh, well, the driver has to purchase tickets for gas.
Got it.
I'm not sure if it's rations, but I know that it's highly subsidized, so you can only get so much gas per month. I don't think they can turn around and sell it, so there's not like a black market in the tickets. Mm-hmm. But it's an interesting system. And also interesting, one of the gas station chains, the name of the gas station is FUCHS. And so you see these signs that say FUCHS all over the country, which is kind of comical. So the other Shibam is far to the east of the capital, about a day's drive or so. but you can break that up. And Wadi Hadhramaut is an ancient agricultural project or a dam of some kind that was built in pre-biblical times. A lot of speculation about the final resting place of the Queen of Sheba in her birthplace. It's either in Ethiopia or Yemen, and they both claim it. So there's a lot of biblical history in the area. Going out to the east would take a few days to see that. I was not terribly impressed with Aden. It was listed in the Lonely Planet, but I think if you had to skip a part, then maybe avoid the south. It's also terribly hot in the south.
Mm-hmm.
But the mountain range immediately surrounding the capital is spectacular. And the views from the top of Phila and Kawkaban, which is another kind of like town on the slope of the mountain, where some of the houses are built into the side, is absolutely breathtaking. You'll find that if there's an event, like for instance a wedding, you'll hear a loud call ring out across the valleys. And so inevitably everyone starts walking towards the noise. So I inadvertently got pulled into 2 separate weddings and like danced around with everybody, along with some other foreign woman who was there. It's one of my best memories of my whole life, I think.
Getting back to your itinerary, you mentioned spending some time at the Shibam and mentioned spending some time in the capital. What should we see? What are the main sites to see?
I'd say just spend a week around the capital, including the 3 towns that are outlying the capital, Kawkaban, Phila, and the small Shibam.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say get up as far north as you can. Try to stick to the Haraz Mountains. I wouldn't say the south is all that interesting as the capital area. I would definitely try to take at least a week to do the east.
But I want you to get to be a little more specific. When we're in the capital, what should we do? What should we see? What should we eat?
When you're in the capital, most definitely take some time just to walk around the old city and gaze up at all the beautiful buildings. Definitely visit some of the souks and the bazaars. There's a chat souk. You don't have to try chewing the plant, but that's open to you if you want to. There's a few mills where I think they grind sesame seeds where camels are walking around pressing these wheels.
Huh.
It looks like something out of Dr. Seuss, and that's pretty special. At certain times of the year, I know that the canal is flooded coming through the center of the city, but if it's not, sometimes it's a highway, and sometimes people play soccer in the middle. So you could join soccer. You'd probably be the center of attention in about less than 5 minutes. There's a really, really good museum in the capital, which is worth a visit.
A historical museum?
It's more or less the National Museum.
Okay.
Not Islamic history or anything religious per se. It's like the history of the region. It has some animals that they brought from Africa and such. So, of course, there's like an obligatory lion. I would take some day trips out to the outlying villages where they have some of the gardens. There's plenty of hikes in the mountains. I would definitely buy some of the scents, because frankincense and myrrh, the sheikhs of old, a lot of the riches came from the incense trade. Mm-hmm. There's an island called Socotra Island, which I haven't been to, but a lot of the best incense supposedly comes from there. But so the people in Yemen and the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula used to get very, very fabulously rich off this, while the Saudis were the poorer part. And I guess today the roles are sort of reversed, with oil being the kind of flavor of the century. You can find those scents in a lot of the markets in the capital. And, of course, there are some tourist shops. You can get miniature Yemeni houses. They look like something you put under a Christmas tree or like a little gingerbread cake. But they're pretty popular wedding presents, too, there. You really can't go wrong. I was kind of scared because I came at 2 a.m. from Cairo into a really dark, strange-looking city from the air. And, like, driving into the city, all the windows are, like, stained glass colors and light. It's really spectacular. You really can't go wrong. You just wander around. The Jebel al-Shams, which means Gate of the Sun in Arabic, I believe, is kind of like the centerpiece of the city. There's some performers there, and there's some, like, music, and there's just a lot of crowds. If what you picture, like, your fantasy Middle East is something out of, like, Aladdin or, like, 1001 Nights, I think you'll find it here more than you'll find in, for instance, like, Dubai. I haven't been to Saudi yet, but I think Yemen is an easier destination to go to. If you're American, for instance, or European, you don't need to arrange a visa beforehand. The people are very open and friendly.
And you had mentioned getting out to one of the gardens in one of the little towns. Do you have a specific recommendation of which town, and also a hike? You had recommended hikes. Any specific hike that you really liked?
I think you go to Kawkaban, it's called. It's a town perched atop of a hill. There's some great views from there. Then I would walk down. You should probably drive up. Then I would walk down through all the towns underneath it towards Silla, but just down the mountain. There are so many little towns outlying the city with gardens, so I would just ask somebody at one of the hotels in the center to organize a day trip for you. It wasn't an offered trip, but I just asked them to take me some of the places. And so they kind of just gave it some thought, and the next day took me around. Inevitably, you have some tour guides that in the middle of everything, they'll just stop and do the prayer 5 times a day. And I mean, that would be an interesting experience for you, but like you could be well on like the side of a mountain and all of a sudden everything stops. You just kind of like chill and off them and really taking the scenery. Yeah, I'm not really sure the names of the towns.
Okay.
But I don't think you have any trouble finding people to take you around because
So you're really recommending that a tour guide or driver is helpful in this particular area, even for an independent traveler traveling on a budget?
Yeah, well, because inevitably you'll be staying in the old city unless you're like very highly paid consultant staying in like there's only one 4 or 5 star hotel in the whole capital. You'll probably be staying at these backpacker places which are anywhere between like 15 to 40 a night. Yeah, you'll have a single room and such, but they do organize stuff for you, and they're used to people asking for unusual things. They, for instance, have guidebook authors who stay with them regularly, and so there's only about 5 or so in one little area, but I don't think you'll have trouble finding people to take you around, and they'll help you with banks and such. There's a few banks so you could get out money if you need. There's a colossal market just flooded with Chinese goods. You can buy traditional things like the Yemeni knives. You'll see belts, you'll see garments. In the big bazaar, you'll see a lot of cheap Chinese toys and clothes and stuff. The same thing you'd see in, for instance, like Turkey or something.
Okay. And because this is Yemen, I think we do have to ask, what about safety?
About 2 weeks after I went, there was an ambush by Al-Qaeda in the region, and it was pretty overblown out of proportion. I think like the tourism industry did take a dive after that. But to put it in perspective, I met all sorts of foreigners, especially Japanese in the capital, as well as Westerners. There's a lot more tourists than people would imagine. I also met a German guidebook author who'd been living there for 4 years, as well as some people teaching English from America. And also some people on R&R from Iraq and such, so either civilian contractors, like servicemen serving in Iraq. As for stereotypical images, at one point I was like, oh wow, it seems like I have the whole place to myself. There's no other foreigners here. And then whenever, for instance, you come upon a shot market or a small gun market or just a lot of people with the Kalashnikov rifles, there'd be a lot of foreigners taking pictures of it just because it was really photogenic, for instance.
Now, photogenic isn't the first term that many tourists would use for a market where everybody's holding Kalashnikovs.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of people come here are either selling articles or like selling photographs to a publication. So you meet really adventurous types here, and then you meet people working here or writing about it.
Okay.
You do meet some NGO workers and some English teachers and such.
So it sounds like Yemen is not yet ready for the let's go on a cruise and lie on a beach resort crowd. That we are talking a little more adventure travel, that you have to be a little more comfortable that this is different from home.
Yeah, well, it's a dry place, too. And
Sure.
there may be a few resorts on the Red Sea, and they say that's a little more loose and open-ended, but I think that's all very relative. I won't expect the cruise ships to start showing up anytime soon, especially off the coast of Somalia and such. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and let's bound the problem a little. You know the question I usually ask, when did you feel most at home and when did you feel furthest from home?
Oh, wow. I guess I felt most at home when I was listening to a lot of Arabic music in the capital in the evening, and then someone turned on a Michael Jackson song.
Okay.
Little kids in the street were dancing. I guess I felt furthest from home. Could well have been the same night, but after the sun goes down, or the sun's just going down, and the call to prayer goes out, it is the most spellbinding thing I've ever heard. Like just like if you sit on a rooftop and just look at all like these gingerbread cake mansions like sprouting up everywhere. There's this green light goes out across and it goes down in between the buildings. And it looks like something off another planet. And I have a few pictures, but even pictures can't do it justice. I've been to some of the other countries in the Middle East, but nothing really, really grabbed my heart like this place. And the people are so nice. So I think I felt furthest from home sitting on the roof of one of these buildings and when the sun went down.
Interesting. And then getting around without knowing a lot of Arabic. Not an issue?
I didn't know any Arabic, so
okay.
Very, very basic. Yeah, you'll have to base yourself in the center, and it'll take a few days to get your feet, but you'll have a great time doing it, and people are really nice. People use a lot of body language there. For instance, I got invited to a few homes. I even got invited to weddings, and no one spoke English, but they just motioned and kept like making me do stuff and handing me stuff and putting stuff on it. And so, yeah, I think you'll have a great time. And I guess the most you have to worry about is making it down the street without getting accosted by a lot of people inviting you every which way. So, for safety, the only way I say is probably better to travel by yourself and to keep a low profile. Street smarts anywhere. I would keep trekking the Lonely Planet Thorn Tree, and I know the far north they're having some problems with the Zaidi sect, which I think they're a particular brand of Shia Islam. It's a very tribal society, and so I think you can still go visit Sada in the north at this point. Like when I went, it was about 2 years ago. Yeah, I would just keep checking up to the minute, and the fewer people you go with, the better. The less ostentatious you are. Like if you just take a local car for most of Yemen, I think you'll be fine. Just like anywhere, I think I felt more threatened, for instance, in Philadelphia and D.C., parts of that, than I ever felt threatened in Yemen, especially in the capital. I don't think there's really anything to worry about there.
Okay. What do the guidebooks recommend that didn't work for you? You think somebody should just skip, or what did they miss?
I think the guidebooks sort of describe the West Red Sea coast and the South coast where Aden is as kind of like a Star Wars-like, sketchy, exciting, rough-looking place. But I think it's just kind of boring. I think you could skip Aden. I think if you went to Aden, you'd have a pretty boring time in Yemen. The things that the guidebooks don't really talk about at all are just like the villages outlying the capital there. And the capital is growing and expanding in every direction. And so at this point, it may be a little bit bigger. But I would just try to do walks in the hills around the capital and try to get like as many views of it as you can and walk as much as you can in the mountains.
Okay.
So more or less just ask the people in the middle of the city if they could put together something special for you. Make sure you see the sesame mills where all the camels are and such. And yeah, I don't really think you can go wrong in this country. No matter which direction you walk, you'll just be spellbound. If you're coming from some of the more well-traveled destinations like Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, etc., I think if you're coming from there to here, like a lot of people fly from Cairo to Yemen next if they're doing kind of a backpacking trip and maybe then go on to Dubai. I think Yemen, from what I read of other people who were traveling at the same time, that was usually their favorite. It's one of my favorites still to this day. Despite concerns about security, I think that you'd be completely fine if you just use common sense and do a little homework beforehand.
Okay. Biggest surprise?
Oh, biggest surprise? How much time they waste chewing that stimulant, shot. I have no idea how big the effect it has on their economy and their health, and like that's just everything there. It's so entrenched in the culture. And so you'll see that, believe me.
Now, as I recall, that's the same stimulant that we're talking about that affects Somalia and Ethiopia as well.
I'm not sure. Maybe they grow it in northern Kenya and Ethiopia, but I know that it wards off hunger, and from what they say, I haven't tried it there, but they say that it makes it possible to look at one view, like for instance a sunset, for just like 2 hours and be completely transfixed by it. And so the best way to describe the look on people's faces when you walk through the Chat Souk, it's kind of like when Frodo's had the ring on for a little too long and he looks a little agitated. So I guess when they're coming off it, they'll look a little kind of agitated. But yeah, who knows? I mean, that's the same reason where coffee came from, and we all use coffee, so it could be my cultural bias. Yeah, that was probably the biggest surprise.
Okay. And what do you wish you'd known before you went?
Oh, just how safe and friendly and wonderful it was. Just all my reservations fell away. Maybe not in the first few days, but then within a week, because I got talked out of it the first time about a year prior. My dad actually ingeniously, instead of telling me, oh, it's dangerous, which wouldn't have deterred me, he told me it's really boring. So I'm like, oh. So then I didn't go. But then it could have been more wrong. So.
And the food?
The food, I didn't really try so much. But they make some sort of little, like pancake thing with vegetables and rice.
So similar to Ethiopian then?
Yeah, I think you got it, yeah. It's not the same, the injera or whatever the Ethiopians have, but it's kind of the same other food. I mean, there's a lot of canned stuff. The U.S. has seemed to have completely flooded them with corn oil and corn syrup and corn everything. I think there's a lot of Thai rice there. I didn't really try traditional food so much, so I won't be the person to ask about it, but I don't think you can go wrong. There's a spectacular restaurant right in the middle. I don't remember the name of it, but it's not so hard to find, and there's like traditional bands play there, and like you kind of sit on the floor and you can hear it and see it from all the rooftops. So
just to clarify this, you're adventurous enough that you'll mind going someplace where they're carrying around the Kalashnikovs as long as we don't make you eat the local food. Is that about right?
Well, I don't remember what I ate.
It wasn't real memorable.
No, I don't think it was so distinct.
Okay.
Okay, it had a lot of tahini sauce.
Okay.
A lot of lamb.
And the tahini would be the sesame-based paste.
Yes, definitely. Okay. I think some okra and like couscous and such. I remember a lot of rice, a lot of lamb.
Okay.
Pancake material of some sort. Yeah, I think I'm really coming up short on the food category.
As we start to wind this down, who's the most memorable person you met?
My guide, Muhammad, because he really took about a week. He ran the hotel at the same time, but he took me all around. I met a lot of people through him, and he helped me with logistics for going elsewhere in the country. This was the beginning of 2008, and one of the last things he told me was, as soon as there's one other bombing or one little incident, there'll be no more tourists here. Like, it'll just collapse. My hotel won't have any business. And 9 days later, there was a thing on the BBC that a group of tourists were ambushed by Al-Qaeda, an isolated incident. But unfortunately, I think that really, really was a blow to tourism, just like you said. Yeah, I'll definitely never forget him.
Finish the sentence for me. You really know you're in Yemen when... What?
Oh, you sit on a rooftop on a giant gingerbread ice cake skyscraper, watch the sun go down, watch crows swirl down into the valley, and then hear the call to prayer go out, and you think, wow, this must be a dream.
And if you had to summarize Yemen in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Gingerbread cake would be one.
It's actually 3 words there, but...
Okay. Let's see. Arabian Nights and incense.
Interesting. Okay. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show and telling us about Yemen.
Well, thanks a billion, Chris.
I have one internet resource for you today, and that is Evernote. You can find Evernote at evernote.com, or you can download an application for your smartphone, either iPhone or Android. And Evernote allows you to have pieces of information, notes, pictures, and those sort of things, and store it up in the cloud, up on their servers. And so I find it a useful thing to have a picture of my passport, all my frequent flyer information, all the frequent flyer numbers, so that when I have my iPhone with me, I can look up all of that information when I'm on the road and don't have to get back to my desktop computer, even if I had a desktop computer. So Evernote at evernote.com. In news of the community, let me say that I am enjoying the pictures that you've been posting up at the Facebook fan page, facebook.com/amateurtraveler. And remember that the theme for the April photo contest is shadows. And I'm enjoying the pictures that you're posting. They're really, truly wonderful. I hope everybody goes over and sees those. And remember, the winner will win a copy of Ralph Velasco's book on 101 Different Ways to Improve Your Photography. And Ralph, again, is the person that I'm doing that photo tour of Egypt with in November. Thank you to all of you who tested out whether you could download Amateur Traveler from your work. Most people could, which was interesting, and one person who couldn't because they aren't allowed to download any podcasts, which I found very interesting, especially since so many are business-oriented. And then we did have one suggestion about the April photo contest, and that again was from Agaguga, who really enjoys it when he hears me fumble over that screen name. And that was that the person who has the best photograph doesn't need a book on how to improve their photography. So perhaps we should award that to the worst photograph, but I don't think we're going to do that this time. I got an email from Peter last week, and Peter says, Chris, I'd just like to thank you for your sacrifices to take the time to do the Amateur Traveler podcasts. I've been listening for 3 years and find all the information very good, not just for planning a trip, but also for reminiscing about holidays previously taken. I was thrilled that you have packed in your job to do this full time. Like many other desk jockeys, I have never been brave enough. My name is Peter, and I come from Northwest England. I have been lucky enough to have done lots of traveling. Like you, it's our thing. I seem to have done most of Europe several times, with the more exotic, for us, being Iceland, Japan twice, Thailand, Cuba, West Indies, Mexico, with lots of city breaks, etc. What a show-off, eh? We regularly go to Andorra and Ibiza 7 times. That said, I've only been to the States once, to New York. I can't seem to convince my other half that there's more than Disney Inc. I would welcome a USA for Non-Americans podcast if you are struggling for inspiration. In the meantime, I am humbly content to absorb your no doubt future fantastic broadcasts. Kind regards, Pete. And that's a little bit of a challenge because there is quite a lot to see in the USA. For those of you who are outside the country, or even for those of you who are in, who haven't done a lot of traveling, one of my favorite countries to travel in is the United States. And I try to do more shows. I do have a show coming up on Oregon, on Portland, Oregon. And I'll try to do more shows on that. It's a little hard, I think, to cover the whole country in one show. Although we've done some theme shows like the National Park Show, even with that, it's difficult to cover what you would see in one trip. Because, again, it is quite a large country, being almost 3,000 miles wide, and we're not even counting Hawaii and Alaska when we do that. So probably not going to do a single show unless I change my mind, I guess. But thanks for the email, Pete. This podcast is a part of the Travelcast Network as well as the Blueberry Network. And what that means now is that because it's part of the Blueberry Network, if you have a Roku box, ROKU, which is a box that connects up to your television that allows you to get internet shows, you can now get Amateur Traveler on your TV. So if you're interested, check that out, Roku.com. With that, we'll bring this show to a close. If you have any comments, feel free to send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or leave a comment on the show notes at amateurtraveler.com, or catch me on Twitter at Chris2X. If you have an iPhone, don't forget to check out the iPhone app version of the Amateur Traveler. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
I'd like to welcome to the show Chris Rosenkrans, coming to us from Pennsylvania. No, see, that's not true. This is why we edit. Actually, I try and make one or two big screw-ups early on, just so the guest knows that it's okay. That's my story. You buying any of it?
You can even put that in the podcast. Maybe it'll make it funny.